Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, the new energy price cap announced today by Ofgem soars past £3,500 a year. Warnings it could be catastrophic for the country as Labour accused the government of unforgivable inaction. Nearly 120,000 postal workers represented by the Communication Workers Union go on strike. We'll hear from their General Secretary about why from the picket lines in East London. We'll have an update on London's weather as well in the next 10 minutes as final preparations are put in place for the return of Notting Hill Carnival this weekend. Also, this evening, climate protesters Just Stop Oil are arrested in Hammersmith for smashing petrol pumps in direct action that's taken place across the capital today. And we'll hear from England football manager Gareth Southgate on a new £92 million funding commitment from the Football Foundation to build more community sports facilities. That's all on the way this evening, but first, the typical household energy bill will hit £3,549 a year from the 1st of October. Millions of households face an unprecedented 80% increase on what they're paying. The decision by energy regulator Ofgem adds more fuel to the ongoing cost of living crisis, worsening by the day as it hits Londoners' pockets the hardest. The limit is currently set at £1,971 for the average household, the maximum that providers can charge customers in England, Scotland and Wales. Boris Johnson has stood by his commitment to provide no new help for struggling families since he announced he would step down on July the 7th, acting as a caretaker PM until either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak become the new leader on the 5th of September. He posed for selfies today, meeting members of staff during a visit to the South West London Elective Orthopaedic Centre in Epsom, seeing how they're reducing the COVID backlogs. He reiterated that it is the job of the next Tory Prime Minister to act on the crisis, well, on top of measures already in place. He hinted there is more cash to come next month.
Well, of course we could see this coming, and that's why we've put the steps in place that we already have. And don't forget that although there will be more announcements next month, more cash coming from September onwards, you shouldn't forget that the pipeline of cash stretches out throughout the autumn. So there's going to be another £650 coming for every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in October. In November, another £300 to help every pensioner, £150 extra for everybody who is entitled to disability benefits, on top of what we're doing with universal credit and the living wage, lifting both of those up. And so cash, there's a pipeline of cash coming through over the next few months and through the autumn and the winter. But that is clearly now going to be augmented, increased by extra cash that the government is plainly going to be announcing in September.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the inaction of late is unforgivable, though.
Look, millions of households and families are going to be worried sick by what are massive increases in their energy prices. So many people have said to me, Keir, look, I may not be the hardest up, but I'm going to struggle to pay these bills. Small businesses saying, you know, we had 2 years of COVID and now we're expected to meet these price rises. You know, and meanwhile, oil and gas companies are making huge profits that they didn't expect to make. And I think almost everybody would say that's not right. That's why Labour, that's why I've said we need to have a freeze on those energy prices. Do not let them go up to those levels and pay for that in part by a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies on those excess profits. Meanwhile, you've got a government that is missing in action. And I think most people looking in today would say that is unforgivable from the government in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
And consumer champion Martin Lewis has said the new energy price cap will cause a financial and mental health catastrophe for the UK public if the government does not urgently intervene.
We've known it was going to be around £3,500 for a good couple of months or somewhere in that ballpark. And what is shocking, both for the damage that it causes people's mental health, but also for the politics of the fact. Last time we had the price cap announcement, we had the plan in place to help people before it was announced. This time, that isn't happening. I am seeing such terrible panic out there from people saying, how will I afford to pay my bills? And you have Ofgem calling for more government intervention. You have businesses calling for more government intervention. You have the energy trade bodies calling for more public intervention. You have consumer groups calling for more public intervention. I am begging and praying and pleading that there is more government help for this winter so that people will not, and the poorest, and this is not catastrophizing, it is a catastrophe, that people will not die because of this winter.
Well, experts and charities are warning people's health and even their lives will be at risk this winter. Leadership rivals Truss and Sunak are being urged to outline exactly what cost of living help they would offer to households should they become the next Prime Minister. Truss hinted at an emergency budget, despite originally arguing for tax cuts over handouts. Also today, thousands of postal workers have been striking in East London over pay and conditions. Around 115,000 posties are taking part. It's the first of 4 days of industrial action, with walkouts also on the 31st of August and the 8th and 9th of September. Royal Mail has said letters will not be delivered on those days and some parcels will be delayed. The Communication Workers Union General Secretary Dave Ward spoke in front of picket lines in Whitechapel, saying it's the biggest industrial action taken by workers since 2009.
We've got over 115,000 members who are out on strike today after delivering a massive yes vote, 97.7% on a 77% turnout. And it's overpay, and our members have just lost total confidence in the actions of the company, the board, and they've lost faith in the leadership of Royal Mail. And people will understand that when they see the way that the company have conducted themselves. So the company made record profits last year, £758 million. They gave away over £400 million to shareholders. They rewarded themselves with huge record bonuses for achieving their financial targets, and then imposed a 2%, not negotiated, imposed a 2% pay increase on postal workers. And against the background of rocketing inflation, rocketing energy bills, is simply not acceptable.
Dave Ward there. Now, also today, the Just Stop Oil campaign group have been back at it and targeting petrol stations across the capital. The climate group said 51 of its members were disrupting 7 petrol stations. The Met Police made a number of arrests. 4 men and 4 women were arrested on suspicion of criminal damage in Hammersmith this morning. They made fuel pumps unusable by breaking display glass and covered them in spray paint. Just Stop Oil has repeatedly protested against new oil projects. On Wednesday, they targeted 3 service stations on the M25. Some other news headlines in brief this evening. A fresh appeal is being made to trace a missing man described as a cheerful and gentle soul to mark the anniversary of his disappearance. Frank McKeever from Islington was last seen on the 28th of August last year along Highbury Park near the junction with Highbury Grange. A man and a woman were arrested on suspicion of murder but have been released under investigation. The 63-year-old's family said they are concerned for his welfare and safety. And a man held in Iran for nearly 5 years on spying charges before being released alongside Nazanin Zahawi-Ratcliffe is set to run the London Marathon. Anousheh Ashuri had always hoped to take part in the marathon while serving a jail sentence on charges he denied. The 68-year-old from Lewisham was released in March. He said he will run to raise funds for Amnesty International and Hostage International. A man has caged himself on Clapham Common to raise awareness for rescue dogs today. Giuseppe Bloom Mangione has been spending the day in the doghouse by the Clapham Common Bandstand to raise awareness for canines in need of rescue and rehoming on what is International Dog Day today. The 35-year-old says that the UK is currently in the midst of a dog welfare crisis, fueled by the continuing rise in puppy farms and backyard breeding, compounded by the shift in post-pandemic back to office working after new owners from lockdown can't cope given the cost of living crisis and dog behavioural issues they've been experiencing. And the Met Police have said they will be on duty in their thousands this bank holiday weekend to keep the public safe as Notting Hill Carnival is welcome back to West London after the pandemic. Preparations are in their final stages. The event from Saturday to Monday will see a national steel band competition with surprise guest artists and the traditional parade featuring live music, dancing, bands and DJs. Usually an annual festival, it celebrates the diversity and cultural richness London has to offer, in particular the impact the Afro-Caribbean community has had on the capital. Do enjoy yourself if you're heading there this long weekend. Well, the weather is looking good for it as well. You'll be pleased to hear. This evening it will remain cloudy into the night and showers will push in from the west. Clearing by the morning though. Saturday full of sunny spells, a high of around 25 degrees as well. Sunday will be warm and bright too, with a gentle to moderate breeze, a few showers, but they'll be short and sharp. Monday also a settled day down into the low 20s. Right, stay with us because in just a few short minutes, Dougie Critchie will join me to preview the Premier League action for the London clubs and some transfer news as West Ham United agree a record £50 million deal for a much-needed midfielder.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Now, with all the news seeming so dark and worrying at the moment, there's always the soothing balm of Premier League football to take your mind off things. Our football man, Dougie Critchley from Football Daily, is here to discuss the big talking points for the London clubs ahead of this weekend's action in the league and to run through some transfer news as we approach the deadline next week. Dougie, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on this evening. Firstly, just let's start with Chelsea, because they are the first London club to play tomorrow and the 3 o'clock kickoffs. A very mediocre start for Thomas Tuchel's men, but they're playing a very struggling side in the relegation zone.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't a good result last weekend for Chelsea, being beaten 3-0 away from home at Leeds. They lost Kalidou Koulibaly to a red card, so he'll miss this game as well. But if they wanted a fixture to find some form, Leicester's a pretty good one. They've had a terrible start to the season. There's speculation around the futures of Yuri Tielemans and Wesley Fofana. So Brendan Rodgers, their manager, will be praying for the end of the transfer window. But Chelsea, it already feels like a must-win game. Arsenal are playing Fulham, and Chelsea can't afford to drop any more points behind Arsenal. They're already 5 points behind them. This feels absolutely massive already for Tuchel.
Yeah, it seems like their transfer market, you know, we're entering the final few days now. What might happen in terms of bolstering their squad is very important for how their season might pan out. They need a striker, really, and perhaps a couple more.
Yeah, absolutely. They're being strongly linked with a move for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who joined Barcelona in January from Arsenal, of course, so there'll be a lot of controversy around that move. But Chelsea, they're in desperate need of a striker. Only Kai Havertz and Mason Mount scored over 8 league goals last year. And Raheem Sterling, whilst he looks very promising, hasn't got off to the best start in terms of scoring just as of yet. They're talking about £60 million for Anthony Gordon, which I just think is a bit of a sign that football's gone truly mad.
Yeah, perhaps. Although he is a wily young Scot and he is one of Everton's best players at the moment, it seems, a struggling Everton. Let's move on to, you mentioned Arsenal versus Fulham. Fulham 7th, 5 places above Chelsea, as we said, was struggling. But of course, Arsenal looking for 12 points to kick off their start to the season. And it could look very likely as they're at home to, you know, a promotion side.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got a great record against Fulham as well. They haven't lost to them since 2012. They've won 6 of their last 8 games against the Cottagers as well. But they'll go in with a little bit of confidence, Marco Silva's men. They got that last-minute winner against Brentford in that London derby last weekend through Alexander Mitrovic, and a fantastic game to watch. But Arsenal come into this full of confidence. The only side with a perfect record in the Premier League, 9 goals for, 2 goals against. Their new signings are clicking. Things are looking very, very good for Mikel Arteta, and it's in direct contrast to their start to the season last year, of course, which is being, you know, shown on All or Nothing over the last few months, and they lost their opening 3 games. So for Arteta's side, this has been a wonderful transfer window and a great start to the season, and they've got some winnable fixtures coming up too.
Yeah, to a team that's taken on the baton of losing your first 3 games of the season, West Ham United in a must-win fixture on Sunday. They travel to Birmingham to play Aston Villa, who are in a tricky spot themselves, so it's a must-win for both sides. So it could be, you know, a pretty tough start to West Ham's season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've been slightly unlucky against Nottingham Forest. They missed a penalty. They hit the post and the bar on that occasion as well. Dean Henderson made some excellent saves. But yeah, for West Ham, it's not been the start to the season we were expecting. And you feel like with the strengthening that the other top 6 sides have done, 7th place would be a great achievement for West Ham this year. And of course, they'll have to deal with Conference League football as well. so their schedule is going to be incredibly congested. It feels like the only way is down, really, for West Ham, although there are some interesting transfer rumours which we'll come on to in due course. But this is a good game for them against Aston Villa. They put in a pretty terrible performance against Crystal Palace last weekend. There's some speculation that Michael Beale's departure to join QPR as manager has sort of destabilised them slightly behind the scenes. He was known as the sort of brains of the operation and the guy that designed their training programme as well. So for West Ham, this feels like a great time to be playing Villa, and they'll be desperate for those 3 points.
Yeah, you mentioned signings for West Ham. A lot of fans online have been saying they lacked a bit of creativity in the middle of the park in their first few games. That could all be sorted if they get this record deal over the line.
Yeah, absolutely. They are linked with Lucas Paqueta of Lyon. He's a really versatile Brazilian. He's only 24. He can play in a midfield too. He can play as a number 10. He can even play off the wing. For me, this is a really exciting signing, and he'll probably compete with Fornals for that spot behind Mikel Antonio or Gianluca Scamacca as the season progresses.
Yeah, quite right. And there's so many London clubs in the Premier League nowadays. We don't have a time for all of them, but let's have a quick word on perhaps Crystal Palace, who take on Man City. They travel up north to Manchester. They are a bogey team for Manchester City, aren't they?
Yeah, they've had some fantastic results against them in the past, and we've already seen them pull off almost a sort of giant killing earlier this season when they drew 1-1 at Anfield. Wilf Zaha started the season so well. Abere Eze looks back to full fitness finally after so many ankle issues, I believe it was last year as well. And they're not really missing Conor Gallagher just as of yet. Although I would be surprised if they didn't re-enter the market before Thursday's deadline as well. Maybe for a bit of midfield depth and maybe an upgrade at right back with Joel Ward getting on a bit. But yeah, great start to the season for Crystal Palace, and Patrick Vieira's stock just rises and rises.
And of course, Brentford take on Everton this weekend. That could be another 3 points for them, looking to dismiss the idea that second-year syndrome in a Premier League is always a bad one. They've got off to a great start. And Spurs travel to Nottingham to play Nottingham Forest. That should also be a promising game for them. They're looking to sort of continue their run in the top 4 as they look to potentially challenge for the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they made a solid start in terms of results, Spurs. Maybe not the performances, at least. I thought they were pretty dodgy for the first half against Wolves last weekend. But you expect their new signings, the likes of Bissouma, to maybe get some minutes in this. Even Perisic has made a good start at left wing-back. Heung-min Son, probably expecting a little bit more from him at the start of this campaign. It'd be great to see him get back to full fitness. And they're playing a Nottingham Forest side that have made some excellent signings, but they made about 17 in total. So it'll take a while for this new side to bed in. I think it's a pretty good time to play Forest, to be honest.
Doogie, thank you as always. Doogie Critchley there, looking through the London fixtures in the Premier League this weekend, and a bit of transfer news for you as well. Now, we're staying with football now, and England manager Gareth Southgate has teamed up with stars from rugby and cricket to launch a new £92 million funding commitment from the Football Foundation into community multi-sport facilities that support rugby, football, cricket, netball and basketball. The investment will benefit the landscape of sport across the capital and the rest of the country, ensuring people will be able to access more places to play. Well, Hebe spoke to Martin Glenn, chair of the Football Foundation, and we heard from the Three Lions boss himself.
So over the next 3 years, £100 million is going to be devoted to improving facilities and making them multi-sport accessible. And we think that's very exciting, collaborating with other national sports rather than being competitive for scarce resources. We think makes a ton of sense. And Gunnersbury here is a beautiful example of it.
So you're also opening up access to other sports in these facilities. Tell me a bit about that and what you're hoping to get out of that.
Yeah, the rationale for, having more multi-sport facilities built is pretty simple, really, that you'll increase the appeal in the local community for the facility that's being built. And, playing sport is just good, right? It's good for your physical health. It's good for your mental health. It's good for community cohesion. So, what we're struggling with in a world of obesity and, challenges like that is attracting harder to reach, segments of the population to get and play sports. So the more sports you offer, logically, the more breadth of people you'll get in. So that's the logic of it. And then when you build really nice facilities with good changing rooms and make the whole experience better, you're just going to get more people coming. You know, there's a simple truth in England that the poorer your community, the less access you have to good quality sports facilities than if you're in a wealthier community. So our targeting is really based on need and, if you like, socioeconomic need, and then not at all by age, because, you know, frankly, what we find when we build facilities like the Gunnersbury facility elsewhere in London or around the country, you get more women's team playing, disability teams playing, all ages. So not by age, but we want it in the communities that need it the most.
You're also rolling out Pitch Power. Tell me about that initiative. Explain what it does.
So the Football Foundation for years has focused its investment on building artificial grass pitches with great changing rooms. That's fantastic. But in the last few years, we realised that we really need to get ourselves organised to try and address the big problem with grass pitches. There's lots of grass pitches around the country in a poor state of repair. Local authorities haven't got a statutory responsibility to maintain them, and frankly, to be fair to them, nor do they have the budgets anymore, given the pressure of social care. So rather than complaining about it, we decided that we would try and find a way of training volunteers involved in football clubs to do it themselves. So Pitch Power is like anything else in life now. It's an app, and what you do is you get it on your mobile phone, you take pictures of the grass that your teams are playing on, you upload it to some experts in the Ground Management Association who are real experts in turf, and they will give you a bespoke recommendation as to what needs to get done on your particular pitch or pitches to improve it. It's actually a great initiative. It's a great example of, rather than saying, can somebody else fix it, taking the problem into our own hands, enabling volunteers to learn how to improve their grass facilities, and then doing that not just in football but rugby and cricket as well.
I think the Football Foundation, via the money that is, that funds it from the Premier League, the FA and the government, have always looked to improve football facilities. But I think we've often missed an opportunity in our country to collaborate with other sports as well, and perhaps to pool funding in certain areas and to have community hubs where it brings local communities together. So I'm really pleased that that collaboration is happening with this project, and hopefully it's the start of things moving forward.
Mr. Southgate there, also speaking with Martin Glenn, Chair of the Football Foundation. Right, we are taking a quick break now. You're watching London Live News with James Dickman, and a reminder of our top story is coming up in just a few minutes. Also, Labour's warning that delays to enshrining the Renters Reform Bill in law could lead to thousands more Londoners being threatened with homelessness. We'll hear from the party's London Assembly member, Sem Moema.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just run you through the main stories from today. For the capital, the typical household energy bill will hit £3,549 a year from the 1st of October. Millions of households face an unprecedented 80% increase on what they're paying. The decision by energy regulator Ofgem adds more fuel to the ongoing cost of living crisis, worsening by the day as it hits Londoners' pockets the hardest. The limit is currently set at £1,971 for the average household, the maximum that providers can charge customers in England, Scotland and Wales. Boris Johnson has stood by his commitment to provide no new help for struggling families since he announced he would step down on July the 7th, acting as a caretaker PM until either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak become the new leader on the 5th of September. He posed for selfies today, meeting members of staff during a visit to the South West London Elective Orthopaedic Centre in Epsom, seeing how they're reducing the COVID backlogs. He reiterated that it is the job of the next Tory Prime Minister to act on the crisis, well, on top of measures already in place. He hinted there is more cash to come next month.
Well, of course we could see this coming, and that's why we've put the steps in place that we already have. And don't forget that although there will be more announcements next month, more cash coming from September onwards, you shouldn't forget that the pipeline of cash stretches out throughout the autumn. So there's going to be another £650 coming for every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in October. In November, another £300 to help every pensioner, £150 extra for everybody who is entitled to disability benefits, on top of what we're doing with universal credit and the living wage, lifting both of those up. And so cash, there's a pipeline of cash coming through over the next few months and through the autumn and the winter. But that is clearly now going to be augmented, increased by extra cash that the government is plainly going to be announcing in September.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the inaction of late is unforgivable, though.
Look, millions of households and families are going to be worried sick by what are massive increases in their energy prices. So many people have said to me, Keir, look, I may not be the hardest up, but I'm going to struggle to pay these bills. Small businesses saying, we had 2 years of COVID and now we're expected to meet these price rises. And meanwhile, oil and gas companies are making huge profits that they didn't expect to make. And I think almost everybody would say that's not right. That's why Labour, that's why I've said we need to have a freeze on those energy prices. Do not let them go up to those levels and pay for that in part by a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies on those excess profits. Meanwhile, you've got a government that is missing in action. And I think most people looking in today would say that is unforgivable from the government in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
Well, experts and charities are warning people's health and even their lives will be at risk this winter. Leadership rivals Truss and Sunak are being urged to outline exactly what cost of living help they would offer to households should they become the next Prime Minister. Truss hinted at an emergency budget, despite originally arguing for tax cuts over handouts. Now, Labour has warned that further delays to enshrining the Renters Reform Bill in law could lead to thousands more Londoners being threatened with homelessness due to unfair evictions. Government data shows that the number of Section 21 evictions that have led to Londoners needing urgent housing support from their council rose by 81% during the last financial year. Sem Moema, Labour's London Assembly housing spokesperson, spoke with Hebe.
The Renters Reform Bill was promised a very long time ago in the general election in 2019. And it's been a commitment that the Conservative government have made to end Section 21 evictions. So that's basically the short-term tenancies that people in the private rented sector, about 40% of Londoners, live under. And the changes, the main change, which was really positive, is the removal of Section 21 to give tenants in the private rented sector some greater security. And it also, we've had some concerns from landlords. It also provides for landlords who might come into difficulty with tenants as well. So I think it's more balanced. It redresses that balance between tenants and landlords and just makes sure that people can continue as far as possible with their family lives at the moment.
This has been really kind of heavily publicised and got a huge platform since the pandemic when people lost their jobs and weren't able to pay rent as easily as before. Have we seen changes since the pandemic, or is it kind of at a standstill?
Yeah, so it's really, I think, helpful for your viewers to understand that during the pandemic, there was a moratorium on evictions, so people were allowed to stay in their homes. And but that didn't mean that those were cancelled. What's happened after the restrictions have been lifted is that landlords have been serving Section 21 notices again. So that means that we've seen an 80% spike in Section 21 eviction notices. And obviously this is really concerning. As you say, there are reasons why in some cases landlords may want to evict, but the point is that there doesn't have to be a reason. So there are all sorts of reasons why some of this is happening right now. But ultimately, having this protection in the Renters Reform Bill means that a landlord would have to give a reason to take back a property and make someone homeless.
Would you say that there have been further delays to changing the reform bill because of the leadership election, with a kind of slightly not knowing who's going to be our Prime Minister as of September time?
So it's been promised by Theresa May, it's been promised by Boris Johnson, and I'm here speaking to you because I want it to be promised by whoever takes over next week. It has to be front and centre of any kind of cost of living measures. It is so crucial to make sure that this piece of legislation passes through Parliament and gains assent I don't know that the current situation in the Conservative Party is the main driver, but I do know that it is something which, as a priority, it means that people will have, whilst everything else is up in the air at the moment, some security around where they're going to be living. And we want to see that enacted. So I'm just really pushing to make sure that they carry through on those promises made to the electorate in 2019.
In terms of the leadership candidates, have we heard whether Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss is kind of up for putting this at the forefront of the cost of living measures and bringing it forward and changing the bill?
I'm not aware that we have had anything, so that does slightly concern me. I think there's been a lot around home ownership. There has been a lot around ways to increase maybe supply and lots around planning. But so far, I've not heard anything about what happens to the 40% of Londoners that are living in the private rented sector and what protections there are going to be. But what I do know, and I really hope they continue on, is that this bill is waiting to be debated and go through Parliament. I really hope they take it through and we see it on the books. I was really pleased to receive a letter from DLUC the other day saying that they are confirmed that they're going to bring it in by 2023. I really hope that we come back next year and talk about something else because this has already been done.
In terms of our potential Prime Minister next month, so it'll be Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss, have we heard from them whether or not they are up for putting this at the forefront of a cost of living deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they want to have some steps around addressing homelessness, around the cost of living, all of those issues that are that are destroying communities, this is a really, really straightforward, simple way to do it. The legislation also does provide protections to landlords who might be concerned. The difference is that this is about redressing ordinary people's rights against landlords, and it means that there is a balance. It means that people will not be made homeless. People who have issues with repairs aren't worried about revenge evictions. And I would really, really encourage them. If you live in a decent country, people shouldn't be worried month to month whether or not they're going to have a roof over their heads.
Sem Moema there with Hebe talking about the Renters Reform Bill. Right, stay with us for our final parts. The real-life married couple taking on two of Chekhov's plays at the Union Theatre will speak to actor James Villa.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. Now, former criminal and family law barrister Helen Fields has announced that her 11th legal thriller, The Last Girl to Die, is due for publication this week. The new novel follows a 16-year-old girl's family as they move to the ocean-battered Isle of Mull, far off the coast of Scotland. We spoke to Helen about how the novel explores hostile locals and indifferent police.
The plot of The Last Girl to Die is that a teenager has gone missing on the Isle of Mull. She has just moved to Mull from America with her family, and the local police don't seem to be working very hard on it. So the family have called in a Canadian private investigator to look for her. Sadly, the investigator finds that girl dead. And after that, it sets off a stream of events whereby the investigator is trying to find out what's happened. The police are being evasive at best. They think it's a tourist who's come onto the island and gone. They very much close ranks within their community. And so the investigator is left really trying to crack the case, but also to crack through the closed ranks and to find out what's going on. The writing phase for it was difficult because, first of all, I wrote it during lockdown, and so the sorts of visits I would normally do to location were extremely limited. And when you're writing about an island community and something that is so based on a landscape and the geography, that was very difficult. The characters themselves were a bit of a gift to write about because there are aspects of this book that hark back to old witchcraft practices. There are aspects of it that are about the real history of Mull and a Spanish galleon that's down at the bottom of Tobermory Bay. So there was lots of fascinating material for me to really dig into. No shortage of that at all. It was really just about making sure, and this is really important in all writing, particularly mine, that I was not being gratuitous, that I was using the story I wanted to tell, which is about, these women who are being killed, and fitting that into a realistic framework, and also making absolutely sure that I was being respectful in the way that I was presenting these victims. I think too often in crime writing, we kind of have these nameless, faceless bodies, and the police rush in, but we don't really talk about or write about the victim's experience. My experience was as a criminal barrister. I also practiced in family law, but I was a criminal barrister, which meant I prosecuted and I defended for a very long time. And I also did courts martial's work. And so I had a real breadth of experience in terms of both talking to victims, listening to their experience, talking to defendants and understanding their background, why they've done the things they've done, why sometimes they've been accused of things falsely, and exactly what it was like going through this system of being pursued and have people trying to say you did something and maybe you did something differently or maybe you didn't do it at all. So I really have taken all of that and fitted it into the books, the crime novels that I write. And I'm always very careful then to think that you have to understand that there's very little about anyone involved in the criminal justice system that's either black or white. You know, it's kind of not that extreme. Most people who do bad things have come from very difficult backgrounds or have had bad things done to them. Most victims have a sense of guilt which is misplaced. You know, quite often they have a sense that if they'd done something differently, it wouldn't have happened to them. And they're left with that sense of why me? There are all sorts of things we don't explore very well in crime fiction at the moment. And I really wanted to have an opportunity to explore this better. Really specifically for this book, I wanted to look at what happens when crimes are committed in a small community, in an island community. It's a very different experience than having a big city police force with all the facilities available to them. And also the way the community reacts is very different. And I wanted an opportunity to take a good look at that. In a small community, you've got to remember that the police are often having to look at suspects about people they live with every day and they see every day, whereas in a big city, all your suspects are people you haven't met. You don't have any relationship with them, but you go onto a small island or a small town and the police find themselves having to suddenly look at suspects with people they grew up with, people that their parents are best friends with, you know, and that's a very dark place to be.
There you go. That book comes out on the 1st of September. Some theatre to wrap up for you now. Two classic Chekhov comedies are on at the Union Theatre in South Bank, performed by a married couple in real life, Anna and James Villa. The unlikely combination of farce and short story gives new meaning to the idea, no matter what, love will always ruin your plans. Well, Hebe spoke to James about his performance alongside his wife.
We chop and change which one we play first, but they're two very different stories with two very different sets of characters. The Bear is a kind of more vaudeville style. It's a bit more expressive, and the characters there are very extreme and they're set in their ways. And Chekhov has managed to notice some really interesting things in both plays. And first of all, he presents us with Smirnov and Popova, who are two very extreme thinking, lonely people who have basically decided that their life is over and that they will live alone. And through nature, Chekhov tells us, they somehow come together. In The Lady with the Dog, it's a more kind of poetic literature style performance, where you have these two people, Gurov and Anna Sergeyevna, who are of different ages, who are both rather unsatisfied with their marriages. Gurov is rather superficial. He lives like on the surface and he's not a very deep person. And Chekhov has kind of noticed this eternal idea. I think it applies to all of us, that we have a kind of different personality on the exterior, with even with our friends and our acquaintances and people we work with. We're not always true to ourselves, and we always wear this kind of mask. And The Lady with the Dog is about unmasking oneself, and perhaps, well, Chekhov suggests that real love can help unmask one's true self.
So there are 4 characters and you and your wife play 2 each. Explain how that works and how the audience are going to kind of differentiate between the characters.
Both plays are two-handers, and we each have 2 very different people to play. So in the interval, we have to completely change our mindset and our brain and our kind of way of thinking. In the first, our characters are kind of lighter and freer and more jovial. Anna Sergeyevna, the female character, she's quite timid and naive compared to her other character, which is very bolshy and strong and forthright. And for me, in The Bear, I play like an ex-military officer, and he's very stoic and very serious, ridiculously so. Compared to Gurov in The Lady with the Dog, who is rather carefree and good-natured and a bit cheeky, and so I think there's a real nice contrast between the absurd in The Bear and the kind of more poetic, kind of cheeky, sexy, amusing style of literature in The Lady with the Dog.
Chekhov, The Bear and The Lady with the Dog is having its final night on Saturday at the Union Theatre, so one last chance for that. Now, the weather before we leave you tonight. It will remain cloudy into and overnight. Showers will push in from the west, clearing by the morning for Saturday, which will be full of sunny spells, a high of around 25 degrees as well tomorrow. Sunday will be warm and bright too, with a gentle to moderate breeze. A few showers may develop in places though. Monday also a settled day, down to the low 20s. Right, that is all from us this evening. Thank you for watching. Join us for London's Weekend early in the morning tomorrow, but for now, from me, take care.